Before you watch this video, subscribe to this channel or this creepy crawly spider is going to crawl all over you for a week. Don't you just love believing that the dire wolf in the Game of Thrones was real? Or that a flying dragon like Draco existed? How cool will that be, right? Legends, stories, and now movies and gaming have brought many mythical creatures to life in a virtual world, making us wish they were real. But you know what? Not all were fiction. Several mythical creatures existed in their age and time. Just like the Hobbit or even the Kraken, the most feared creature of ancient Greece. In this amazing video, we're going to show you 10 mythological animals that exist in the wild. Number 10. The Kraken. The Kraken was the most feared of all mythical sea creatures in ancient Greece. Several ancient texts contain a reference to this deadly beast, which you may have seen in movies too. The Kraken was the nemesis of ancient mariners, with the strength to sink the largest of ships just for fun, causing mayhem and destruction on the high seas. But today, we finally know which sea creature was responsible for this myth. And yes, you're right in guessing. It's the giant sea squid. The giant sea squid is the biggest invertebrate that we know of in the living world, but it remains elusive to scientists. The giant squid is found in the deepest parts of the Atlantic Ocean, and what little is known about it is through carcasses that have been found washed up on shore. This fearsome creature can grow to enormous sizes, with the largest measuring a whopping 66 feet. Squids have huge eyes with a diameter of 10 inches. They have 8 arms and 2 tentacles, with which they hunt food like smaller marine animals. Although some say, they sometimes attack an occasional whale or two. In 2007, scientists were lucky enough to discover a giant squid for the first time in its natural habitat. Number 9. The Okapi. The Okapi was considered a mythical creature indigenous to the region of the Congo. It's a weird combination of horse, giraffe, and zebra, and was not known till the Great Congo Expeditions, which launched 150 years ago. Though they appeared intimidating and magical, the Okapi is a peaceful herbivore. Even today, not much is known about the origins of the creature, once considered mythical, and the reason for its unusual mix of 3 different species. There was a time when the Okapi was also considered to be the mythical unicorn in Africa, with tongues so big it could lick its own eyes. It was gifted with super hearing though, which it could hear any approaching threat from hunters and predators alike. Although Africans local to the regions of the Okapi have been pursuing these animals for years, it was still an unknown entity for the Western world until an American writer, Henry Morton Stanley, chronicled the beast, calling it a type of African donkey. The head of the expedition and colonial administrator Sir Harry Johnson collected hide specimens of the natives to be examined in Britain. Zoologists immediately hailed it as a new breed of zebra. When Johnson came across the remains of a dead okapi, he was quick to realize how the animal's characteristics lean more towards the giraffe rather than a horse or a zebra. Number 8. The Hobbit. Lord of the Rings fans out there will have much to rejoice knowing that the Hobbit isn't as mythical as people think. And yes, people like Frodo and Samwise did exist. The term Hobbit was made famous by the writer J.R. Tolkien in his books The Lord of the Rings. But the famous small men of the movie were inspired by a type of pygmy, whom anthropologists discovered in 2003, living on the island of Flores, in ancient Indonesia, 50,000 years ago. Skeletal remains of these hobbit-like humans named Homo floresiensis revealed how they all grew to just 3 feet tall. They possessed all the features that were typically like Tolkien's hobbits, and are now an interesting case study, revealing new aspects of human evolution. Homo floresiensis is a sister species of Homo habilis, and were considered very strong and sturdy, famous for their survival abilities, just like the hobbits of the Shire. Further study of the skeletal remains of Homo floresiensis revealed that they had even existed as far back as 190,000 years ago. Number 7. Komodo dragons. Imagine if dragons existed. Would that be frightening or something amazing? Wouldn't we all love to have just a bit more magic in our lives? When we think of dragons, the first thing that comes to mind is these huge, ferocious flying beasts, breathing fire enough to obliterate an entire city with one gush of their breath. Dragons were dangerous carnivores, which killed and ate their prey with no distinctions. They were also considered supernatural with magical powers. But hey, the Earth still has dragons, and it could be these very creatures that breathed life into the myth of the dragon. Have you heard of Komodo dragons? Well, in the scale of ferociousness and viciousness, there's no similarity between the two. But going further back in time, there was a much more aggressive version of the Komodo. And that's the Megaliana, its ancient and dangerous relative. Apart from looking ugly and frightful, they had a real poisonous bite. which could lead to victims bleeding to death. These beasts were massive and grew up to 26 feet in size. And this is one feature they could have intimidated people into fearing them and creating the myth of being magical and mythical creatures. Their dragon-like features are what ancient writers and observers might have dramatized into poems, ballads, and stories of the day, giving rise to the legend of the dragons we now know. Number 6. The Killer Orca. Most of you have probably read or at least heard of the story of Moby Dick, the ferocious killer orca that plagued the lives of seafarers in its time. This classic novel by Herman Melville was inspired by a real-life creature, given mythical proportions to induce a more dramatic effect on readers for generations to come. Moby Dick was a monstrous great white killer whale, or orca, on a rampage to kill and destroy everything that encroached in its area. The storyline followed the exploits of a die-hard captain of a ship, called the Essex, who fights till everything is lost, inspiring a generation of brave sailors and sea captains who lived up to their hero. The story was an exaggeration, obviously, and influenced by the Mocha Dick, a large killer orca that terrorized the entire coastal population of Chile in the 1820s. The most famous incident involving Mocha Dick was when the orca destroyed a large ship, killing all its crew except for its captain, the lone survivor. After writing his famous book, Melville decided to travel to Nantucket and meet him to find out more about his experience. The book was also adapted into a movie, but the fact remains that Moby Dick was not a figment of one author's imagination. Number 5. Imugi, Korean super dragons. The Imugi were gigantic, fearsome, serpent-like creatures, and essential parts of Korean folklore. They were regarded as a large dragon who didn't know what they wanted to be, a good dragon or a large, feared, fire-breathing one. That was the difference, which meant not all of them were evil, and some turned benevolent and angelic creatures associated with good luck. This is also why in some cultures, dragons are considered magical beings and symbols of good fortune. But then some chose the dark side and turned evil, becoming a dreaded monster that would wreak havoc on villages and fishermen. These mystical stories gained even more ground in 2009, when a Colombian scientist discovered the skeletal remains of prehistoric monster snakes, uncannily similar to the description of the Korean mythical dragon. These prehistoric snakes were given the name the Titan boa, and were found to be over 50 feet in length, and weighing perhaps over a ton. It made the anaconda look like a worm in comparison, and remains till this day the largest ever snake discovered by humans. No wonder the ancient Korean legends made a great fuss of them, and made them immortal in their stories and tales told even today. Number 4. The direwolf. If there's one mythical creature that has gained instant fame in the last few years, it's the direwolf. And we know why, don't we? The divide between the real and mythical becomes blurred when it comes to this magnificent creature called the direwolf, made a household name thanks to the famous television series Game of Thrones. But guess what? Direwolves did exist, called Canis Dirus, or fearsome dog. The direwolf is an extant species of large wolves, much bigger and bulkier than their counterparts today. They were carnivorous predators found mostly in North America and parts of Europe and China, with only the saber-tooth or Siberian tiger as competitors in the wild. Direwolves were known to exist in the late Pleistocene era, and fossils of the largest known species were found in Rancho La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles. Number 3. Chupacabra. The chupacabra is yet another loathed but very famous mythical creature that gave people nightmares. There are several references to the chupacabra in South American folklore, which describe them as a hairless feral dog with big eyes, which ate off livestock or even drank their blood. The name itself can be roughly translated in English as goat sucker. The legend could have been based on animals much smaller in size, but grotesque nonetheless. The real version was a mixed breed of domestic dog and wild dog. The blood-sucking reputation might have also been due to the animals having weak teeth that didn't really allow them to devour their prey like usual carnivores. Instead, they probably suckled the flesh slowly till it was reduced to just bone and marrow. The chupacabra was said to be an elusive creature that always remained hidden in the great jungles and wastelands of Mexico. Number 2. Narwhals. A unicorn whale? Isn't that a bit creepy? But the narwhal is no mythical creature. It's real. Narwhals, with their defining feature, a long tusk, were a common sight in Canada and Russia. Found mostly in Arctic waters, they had their tusks sticking out of their foreheads, just like a unicorn. Their mythical and legendary status gained prominence with references in the famous book by Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The narwhal was considered having magical powers in their tusks that could help people locate the treasure. This is why they were also hunted by medieval hunters, who sold their tusks to fortune hunters and traders for large sums of money. Number 1. The Berserkers. If you're a gamer, you'd know by now how cool the new standalone Berserker game is, right? But how did a video game character make this list, and at number 1 to boot? Pretty interesting, huh? Now only seen in video games, Berserkers were considered superhumans, with unbelievable combat skills and power. Berserkers were commonly found in Norse literature, and described as intense and aggressive warriors, who fought with uncontrollable fury. Berserks were ancient Norse warriors, famous for being excellent war strategists, which is why they were much sought after in Viking armies. To make themselves look fearsome and intimidating to their enemy, they wore outfits made of the skins of wolves and bears. They were so cold-blooded that they would never distinguish between friend or foe entering a battle, as if in a trance and hypnotized only to kill. This is why they were used only as an advancing attack weapon directed at an enemy, and not as part of a regular infantry. They were insensible to danger, death, or pain.